and welcome to Hobbit Talk, Episode 2, where we will be discussing the Rings of Power. Many people have heard of the Rings of Power, or seen them depicted in the movie, but few people actually know much about them at all, except that they exist, and this is where the video comes into play. There are 20 Rings of Power. 19 of them were forged by the Elves of Eregion, and Sauron created the final ring. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky. 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone. 9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them. 1 ring to bring them all, and in darkness bind them. Sauron forged the One Ring, or the Great Ring rather, in the fires of Mount Doom in Mordor, which was used to rule the rest of them in order to expand his reign over Middle-earth. Now for the Elven Rings. The 3 Elven Rings were forged by Celebrimbor, widely regarded as the greatest craftsman in the history of Middle-earth. They were named Narya, the Ring of Fire, Nenya, the Ring of Water, and Vilya, the Ring of Air. Narya is known for its ability to inspire others, and its most well-known bearer is Gandalf. Even though most people believe that Sauron had no influence on these rings, he did, and it was to a great extent. Many people wonder how he had such great knowledge about the forging of the rings. He actually lived and spent much time with Aule, the Valar who had the most knowledge about creation and forging. To try and sway the elves, he posed as an alleged deputy of the Valar, Annatar, sent to teach and give gifts. He taught them many things, but greatest of all was the ability to forge rings of power. His secret plan was to help forge rings for the elven leaders so that he could corrupt them and lead to an easy path for victory in his attempt to rule Middle-earth. While he was under the guise of Annatar, certain elves such as Elrond and Gil-galad were suspicious of him. They rebuked his teachings and gifts, and encouraged others to follow suit. On the other hand, the elves of Eregion were very accepting, and it was here that Sauron gave Celebrimbor the knowledge to create the rings. This is when they created the majority of the rings. With Sauron's help, they learned how to forge many powerful rings. After some time, Sauron left, thinking that every ring had been forged, and went to forge the One Ring. The Great Ring had the power to control all other rings that it helped create. Fortunately for the elves, they could hear Sauron. As soon as he spoke the spell to grant himself power over the others, the elves quickly took off their rings in an effort to stymie Sauron's plan. Although he did have a small connection to the 3 elven rings, it wasn't until after he forged the One Ring that he knew he could not control the elven rings due to the fact that he had no direct connection to the actual creation of them. In other words, he never touched them. Seeing this, Sauron waged war against the elves in an attempt to reclaim the rings and redistribute them to other peoples of Middle-earth. During the Great Battle, Eregion had been destroyed, but Celebrimbor managed to save the 3 rings and give them to Gil-galad, Círdan, and Galadriel, the 3 greatest elves. Sauron was, however, able to find the 9 rings which he gave to men, but could not find any more. To obtain the rest, he tortured Celebrimbor until he had the last 7. Now for the Rings of Men. As stated earlier, there were 9 rings, and each were created by the elves. When the time came, Sauron stole them and gifted them to the men. Initially, the men became great sorcerers and kings, but quickly, the 9 rings made for men perverted them, and quickly led to the abuse of their power. As many people know, the rings drained the men, and they soon turned into wraiths, or the Nazgul, and were dominated by Sauron's will. They spent the rest of their existence searching for the Great Ring and living in the Wraith world. Now for the Rings of the Dwarves. 6 were given to them by Sauron under the guise of Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. The 7th, however, was given to Durin III during the Second Age by the Elves. This claim is disputed though, due to the fact that it is said that Celebrimbor gave Sauron each of the 7 rings. This is not clear throughout the lore, and is more or less left up to the imagination of the reader. Nevertheless, we can assume that there was 1 ring for the head of each dwarven house. The rings were used by them to accumulate their massive hoards of treasure. Although Sauron should have been able to corrupt them, the dwarves were able to successfully use them to their advantage without Sauron taking control over them. However, the outcomes of their actions did largely benefit Sauron. The largest example of this would be Smaug taking control over the Lonely Mountain, Erebor. Their lust for gold and treasure reflected that of many dragons, and it led to conflicts with many of them. Along with this, conflicts between the dwarven houses arose, causing more chaos in Sauron's advantage. In the end, when the One Ring was destroyed, all of the rings lost their power, and this ended the elves' long lives, and was the catalyst for the dominion of men. This concludes the video. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and if you really liked it, get the bell on for more videos in the future.